Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Chocolatito y Chat podcast. Today is going to be my first episode of mine, of course, because what we're going to do, my mom and I, we're going to be alternating. So one day she'll be posting, well, I'll be posting it, but she'll have a podcast app, and then I'll have a podcast app. So it'll go in that direction, if that makes sense. And then in the comment section down below, if you'd like to see us together or would like to have podcast episodes together, both speaking Spanish, both speaking English, let us know and we'll definitely do that. Maybe we'll do like a Q&A um in that format. But for now, it's going to be a posting schedule of Tuesdays for my mom or Thursdays for my mom, and then Saturdays and Sundays for me and Sundays or Saturdays for me. And it's going to be around 5 p.m. Pacific time whenever they're going to be posted. But without further ado, let me talk about my childhood because that's primarily what I'm going to be talking about. I'm going to be talking about childhood, early adulthood, I guess you can call it too. So let's get started. So, first of all, I would say that I'm really grateful for the childhood that I had, and I wouldn't change it for anything in the world because back when I was younger, of course, I would say that I took things for granted. I would sometimes, uh, before I slept, I would think to myself, or before I had to do certain things with certain family members, like daily chores or something, or actually work, because my aunt, she owns a cleaning company, and it used to be family run, basically. It's still family run, but they're mostly just, employees that actually work day to day, and then my family does most of the logistics part of it. But anyways, so my aunt, she's the owner of a cleaning company, and I would always help out during any break that I had for school. And so I would always basically tell myself that, oh, I can see like my other friends, they actually have trips lined up. They're actually going places with their families or friends or whatnot. And I'm over here cleaning a store at like 8 p.m. And in reality, in the grand scheme of things, I mean, I guess I did have a point when I was younger because you see like your friends and everything having the grandest old time. But at the same time, I learned and developed skills that my friends or other classmates didn't necessarily have the opportunity to have, maybe, right? So I'm grateful for that because I learned and grew my work ethic tremendously, I would say. And then also I learned how to be disciplined because it is very hard to, I guess, instill the idea of discipline into children or young adults at an early age because it's such a difficult task to do because you're not necessarily telling them like, I don't know, you can't really go too harsh in it because I don't know, this generation, there's a lot of gentle parenting, which I agree to some degree on some some topics, some things, but on other aspects, I kind of wouldn't necessarily agree with because gentle parenting, to be honest, isn't necessarily the way that I was raised, at least. I would say that the label that I normally give my childhood or early adulthood is tough love. All my family members, they showed up in ways that maybe other families don't show up, but it worked for me, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it'll work for other people. But I know that it worked for me, right? So I'm talking about my own experience, and this is all my own experience, right? So I'm a little biased because I'm talking about my own experience. But anyways, so when it came to when I was like around 4 or 5 years old. My uncle, he would normally be like, you have to eat everything in your plate. It doesn't matter. You have to eat everything. So whenever I had to eat a meal, right? Whenever my grandma would have to or would serve me a plate of food, I would normally either feel well, not excitement necessarily, depending on what I liked, because the main dish normally was something that I really liked because my grandma would really have like protein packed meals, right? So it was the main course I would say would be like protein, so it would be chicken or I wouldn't necessarily say pork. I would say more chicken and maybe beef probably or steak. And then the sides would be vegetables and then beans and rice. That's normally what we ate. And so when it came to vegetables and certain things, I'm I really did not like this one type of vegetable salad that is pretty popular, I would say, in Mexican cuisine. It's called ensalada rusa, and that's basically like a mix of vegetables with mayonnaise. And I didn't necessarily like that type of texture and flavor, but my uncle was like, no, you have to finish it all. So I learned at an early age to be grateful for what I had and to actually eat what I needed in a sense. So I learned what I needed to have to nourish my body adequately because sometimes as a child, you're navigating nutrition, right? You don't necessarily, you want the good stuff, right? Quote unquote, which is junk food. You want something that tastes good, that is outside of the house and whatnot. But I don't necessarily relate to that anymore because now that I'm in college, once I come back, I really want home cooked meals. So take advantage of that. Take advantage of that because, especially if you're in high school, middle school, elementary school, I don't care. Take advantage of home cooked meals because they are the freaking best thing. It's the best thing ever because you can never replicate that in a fast food chain or whatnot. It will never be the same. So, whenever your grandma, your mom, your aunt, whoever cooks for you, and or whatever dish you necessarily like of your families, if they ever offer it to you, say yes. Be grateful for it because you never know when you're not going to be able to have that dish or that person. Also, spend time with your family. It's super important for that to happen. Anyways, I'm getting a little sidetracked, but yes. So I learned from a very, very early age about how to be able to learn nutrition and what to how to nourish my body properly, I would say. And second of all, my uncle and aunt, necessarily, I would say mostly my uncle, my oldest uncle, he was very pivotal he was very important in my development because when it came to certain like homework, math, oh my gosh, math was insane. I remember sometimes I would stay up, you know those memes where you're doing homework with your dad or a family member or whatnot, and you're staying up because you don't know what's going on and they're yelling at you because you're not sure what you're doing because you might have not asked a question or something like that. Oh, and then especially the projects. I remember when I was in middle school, I had this big project in history and my family went all out. My uncle, he was very artistic, so he helped me in that aspect. And I remember going to the school, and everybody would think that my parents would do my project, which was very frustrating because, of course, I would stay up and do the project as well. They would help me, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they did all my project because there's certain people that I knew back in the day that would actually they would have their parents do their projects, but that wasn't necessarily my case. I mean, I did have assistants, but it wasn't like they did the whole thing for me. But back to what I was saying. So, nutrition and then discipline, especially in homework. And then also, I would say that in my childhood, I learned how to be independent in the sense that I knew that I had to do schoolwork and that was well, quote unquote, that was my job. So I knew that I had to do that, but that also goes hand in hand with discipline. And then third of all, I would say that was touching back on parenting and gentle parenting and gentle parenting and whatnot. But I think that today, now in modern times, what we're I guess what we're missing is that there's a need to grow up, or there's really a need to grow up real fast when it comes to children. Because my grandma, she's very religious, so she's a catechist, I believe that's what you call it. So she's basically a professor in a way, or a teacher that teaches and provides support and helps children uh actually be ready for catechism, I guess. Or yeah, yeah, for catechism. And so after that, I remember after one of her classes or something like that, preface, most of her students are pretty young. I think they're in fourth or third grade. So that's really young. I wouldn't even say preteens. That is a really young child. Anyways, and there was this one girl that went to class or something like that. And she was wearing a full face of makeup and she was wearing a pretty short skirt. And my grandma basically asked or told her that she didn't really need makeup. She was perfect the way that she was, and that beauty is within, which I think that that's really an important message because sometimes you forget that you don't necessarily need superficial things. Because I would say when I was in high school, like my early-ish years of high school, so freshman and sophomore year, I would fixate on how I looked tremendously because I remember I would try to buy uh this from this brand that was I guess like nat quote unquote natural makeup look. And so I would get their, I think it was like their concealer or something like that, and I would put it on, and I remember that whenever I didn't put it on, I felt so naked and I felt so iffy about myself. I wouldn't want to look myself in the mirror because I thought that that wasn't me because the person that was showing myself was the person that had that little concealer on. And preface, it wasn't necessarily that much makeup. I literally would just put 3 dots on each cheek and that would be it. But it makes a difference when you do it every single day. At least for me, that was the case. And I think that it's important for young girls, young people in general, to understand that you don't need to wear makeup every day and you don't need it necessarily to be beautiful. Anyways, going back to the story, my grandmother was telling this uh young child to, embrace the true beauty within. And afterwards, I think like a week after, the mother came and saw my grandmother and she was like, "Oh, was there a problem with my daughter wearing makeup and whatnot?" And my grandmother basically said that there was no problem. She just was trying to, you know, empower the inner beauty because as a child, you don't need makeup. And there's another thing that really bugs me to this day is the idea that children need a phone at a really early age in life because I don't remember what survey or something or some video that I watched. And I was basically talking about there were college kids talking about what age they receive a smartphone. And most of them said third grade, fourth grade, which is mind-boggling to me because I received my smartphone around the age of like I was in eighth grade, I think. In seventh grade, I got a phone, but it only had Wi-Fi. And I remember I was like, yes, I was so happy because I was like, yes, I can like bring it around and it's basically like a decoy phone, right? Because it doesn't necessarily work. It just works, well, it does work to some extent, but not necessarily how, a normally a smartphone would work, you know? And it was just so funny because I remember that excitement back in the day and it's truly mind-boggling. But anyway, so I truly got a phone in eighth grade. I had a flip phone. I got a flip phone in fifth grade. And I remember I was super excited because I got a flip phone. And I called my friend up and I was like, guess what? I got a phone. And then we met up at our school. I was in fifth grade, she was in fifth grade, we were both in fifth grade. And I showed her and she basically ruined my dream and or my fantasy or whatnot. And she said, that's not a phone. That's a flip phone. That's not really a phone. And I was devastated. Anyways, looking back at it, I probably I lived, you know? And so that's the important thing. You grow, you don't care. It's fine. But that's the thing. I don't think children should have a smartphone at a really young age, especially with TikTok and YouTube Shorts. Every freaking social media platform has become they have another condensed form of media within the app, which is crazy to me because our our memories and our attention span has been going downhill just because of that. Because first it was TikTok and then certain apps like Instagram and I believe YouTube, they're creating condensed forms of media. So YouTube Shorts, Instagram Reels, and it's actually insane because you can swipe until your finger drops. And sometimes, and that's why I actually deleted TikTok back like 2 or 3 years ago because I was swiping and I would look at the clock or, at the time and it would be, I don't know, like 3 p.m., whatever. And then once was like, oh my gosh, I've been doing this for a bit now, I would look back up. It would be like 7 p.m. Time flies when you're actually just swiping and no, that's not correct. So I quickly deleted TikTok after that. And then I I deactivate my Instagram. I normally deactivate my Instagram whenever I'm back in school because I don't want to have that type of, I don't know. I just don't want to doom scroll and all that. And then I would say that I haven't activated it again since because I don't know, it's just too much. I think that ever since I was in middle school, I have an off relationship with Instagram because I always do something that I necessarily don't want to do. So I remember I think I posted something on Instagram and it wasn't bad. It was just I think get together with some friends at the time and I don't know why I posted that. I still struggle to this day about that post, and it wasn't bad. It's just not the best. And I'm getting sidetracked. But basically, I don't think young children should have a phone. And then I also don't think that makeup should really be a thing for young children. And then also, what is it? Oh. also sexualization at a young age. I would say that TikTok especially has engraved into our minds, or at least into the younger generations, they have to look a certain way to live and to be accepted, quote unquote, in society, which, oh my gosh, that boggles my brains out because back in high school, I would say high school was a doozy for me, but I would say that I always try to fit in to some degree to assimilate, I guess, because as a Mexican American, you're not going to look like your average blonde teenager that drives a Jeep. And so going to predominantly white high school, I think that it kind of didn't necessarily help me in that in in a social setting because I don't know, especially to preface that most of the people that went to that high school went to a previous or a different middle school that I went to because basically there's two high schools in my hometown and two middle schools. So mainly the middle school that I went to, the people that went to that middle school, of course, went to a different high school but in the same area. And I went to the other high school that was a bit farther but in the same town. But I went to that high school because of a certain program. Anyways, so I was really out of my element. I only knew, I think, like three people from my previous middle school. And so I basically made friends with those people. And it was great. I think there was a falling out and all of that good stuff when it comes to high school. But normally the advice that I would give for current high schoolers and maybe incoming freshmen is that be yourself. This is such a cliche. I hate when people say, or I dislike when people say this because it really is like, oh my gosh, it's easier said than done, which is super true because I can't tell you enough about that, but it really is the truth. If you're yourself and you're true to yourself, you will be fine. It doesn't matter. I mean, back in high school, I was pretty quiet. I still am pretty quiet. I'm pretty introverted when it comes to school and social circumstances. But whenever somebody gets me out of my shell, well, it kind of depends. I'm like a light switch. Whenever I need to turn it on, I'll turn it on. But it takes time. And I think that being comfortable with being uncomfortable is normally a skill that you develop throughout your years of living because once you're old enough, right? Once you mature, once your frontal lobe starts to develop, you automatically know or you automatically have the sense that you don't care. You don't care what people think. And that's the beautiful part about growing up is that you shouldn't care about what other people think because people are going to say what they want to say regardless of what you're doing. So just go for it because especially in a small town that I live in and I grew up in, it's very hard to make, I guess, make people happy. So why are you trying to make other people happy when you yourself should make yourself happy? So please just focus on that. And then, second of all, my childhood, adulthood, I would say that I really struggled with my sense of self in the ways that I would say my freshman year, I was my truest self versus any other year in high school because sophomore year, it was COVID year, so lockdown. And I didn't actually, I would say sophomore year, I was pretty much myself as well. Junior and senior year I was off the rails. I wasn't necessarily myself. I don't know what I was doing. I didn't necessarily feel like I was in my own body, your own skin, if that makes sense. I didn't really enjoy going to school, and I was dealing with some health problems at the time as well. But one of my friends, to this day, she was one of the greatest parts of high school because we were very much our true selves together, and we were able to talk about anything and everything, which I really enjoyed because sometimes you need that shoulder to, you know, lie on and rely on and actually be able to talk to another person. And then also, I think that with time, I know this might sound as like a cliche as well, because I'm just spitting out cliches right now. But as you grow, mature, you start to have a very strong relationship with your parents, I would say, especially with my mom, at least in high school. I didn't really have that strong bond with my mom as much as I do right now. Right now, I can really joke with her, and we can talk about things that I didn't necessarily feel comfortable back in high school talking about. But now I feel that bond and that, I guess extra oomph to our relationship, that I feel that comfortability with her. And I don't necessarily think that maybe staying in my hometown would have helped our relationship, if that makes sense. So I'm a strong advocate for distance, if possible, with families. Because when it comes to distance and I guess long distance relationship with your families, like going to college, for example, it kind of creates that notion or that feeling whenever you're reunited that you're happy to see each other. You're expected to do certain things that maybe you wouldn't do on a day-to-day basis, and you don't get tired of seeing them day to day. So I think that if you're able to have the funds, or yeah, if you have the funds to go to college from a distance, do it, but also don't get into debt, right? If you're going to college, that's another piece of advice. Don't get into debt. If you're not able to afford a 4-year college straight off the bat after high school, don't do it. Go to a community college, because I know this is contradicting because I'm telling you guys to go to college from a distance. And now I'm telling you to go to community college if you can't afford it. But that's the truth. Go to community college if you can't afford it, because that will be a stepping stone, because then you can transfer to a university that could probably give you a scholarship and all that good stuff. And then also, a community college is not bad. It's not a bad decision to go to a community college. I think it's very much of, I don't know. I feel as if some people shun the idea of going to a community college, when a community college can give you great opportunities that other universities may able to, you know, be available to students. But for community college, I think that there's certain resources, and there's always that sense of community, of course, community college, aka there's a sense of community within the college in itself. So I think that it's a very good thing to, weigh out your options, consider, because sometimes you don't necessarily know what you want to do in a 4-year university, and you kind of want to weigh out your options, want to understand what other careers there are that you may want to look into. So I think that community college is a great deal, and should be considered as one of the top options, I would say. And then lastly, I want to get into my childhood once again, because I'm dabbling right now. I'm going back and forth within advice and then also my own experiences, right? So I guess in for my childhood, I would say that or my family, it wasn't a normal family. Nobody's a normal family, right? But I remember I would watch Full House, and that was the first, I would say, not dysfunctional family, but not the irregular American quote unquote family that you normally see in television and movies and media. And that was great to see because me personally, my mom, I grew up with a single mom. My grandparents were there all the time. My oldest uncle and my aunt were there all the time. And it was just great to see that not everybody fits in that mold, so to speak. And then also, I recommend the movie Little Miss Sunshine. If anybody hasn't seen it, go watch it. I think that's the first movie in cinema history that I've seen, at least, that really portrays a realistic portrayal of a dysfunctional family because I think I relate to that family a lot, and it was great to see. Um, I love that movie. It's one of the greatest movies ever. I think that's one of the top movies that I have on my list as um to recommend to people. So please go watch it if you haven't watched it already. But I think that there's a need for reconstruction of not reconstruction, but a need for reevaluation of certain things of I guess for parenting. I'm not a parent. I can't speak about raising a child. I don't know how to raise a child. But I think that there's a need or urgency for parents to understand what's going on currently with technology and all of that, and how harmful that can be for a child, especially. And so I think there needs to be a way to not shelter children from that, but also kind of shelter children from media at a young age until they're old enough to actually understand what's going on because it's very important for them to enjoy their childhood because you're going to be an adult for most of your life, right? And when I was younger, when I was a preteen, teenager, whatnot, I would always hear this. I would hear this from my mom. I remember I went into Target with my mom when I was around 12 or 11, and I heard it from a Target worker, and he told me, or yeah, I think a Target worker, and he said, enjoy your childhood while it lasts because once it's over, it's over. And I kept thinking about that. Like, I would think about that. I think about that till this day. And I think about it or I thought about it every single year growing up, right? And until I was like probably 16 or 17, I realized, or not even 16 or 17, probably 17 or 18, I realized how impactful that statement was because once you're an adult, you're an adult. You can't go back. And that's why I say enjoy your childhood while it lasts because it's not going to last forever. But thank you so much for joining me on my first episode of Chocolatito y Chat. If you have any suggestions of what topics we should cover, please comment them down below. I hope you have a great day or, yeah, great rest of your day, morning, evening, whatever it may be, and tune in for the next episode.